responsibilities, there's deliverables, and major milestones in the high-level timeline. And I'd like to draw your attention to that last section, so because I think if you see what I was trying to do, and again, this is very similar to what we did with the CPP. No, not word for word. I wish it could have been, because then it would have, I could have just changed the title of the document. This would be the thing that we would send to the City Council as a response to that Directive 3, which I came up with this groovy name called the Equity Directive.
Good name.
And the Equity Directive says that we are to report back to the City Council by March 1st, 2011 on how programs will be implemented moving forward. We have been very clear to City Council we can't meet that date with those deliverables, but we can come back with a plan per plan, and they're okay with that. They're okay with that. And so that would actually go to the Committee of the Whole meeting on the 10th of March, the March 1st date, what they have their dates wrong. So it'd be the Committee of the Whole 10th, and we'd have David, the NCEC approves it, David would go and present the plan per plan. Then we get into the hard work, which is how do we engage with the community? How are we going to do that? What is the purpose of that engagement? What are we asking them, and so forth and so on. And that all gets wrapped up in this thing that you'll see in this timeline as the work plan. And you know what? That's exactly what we did with the CPP. We had some meetings, we did some brainstorming about engagement and who stakeholders were, and then Robert went off, put together a two-part engagement plan, and came back and we discussed that and approved it. So this is, again, I'm suggesting there isn't anything, we've gone through this and it seemed to work in the past, this sort of approach. I just want to finish something else on the timeline. Because this guy, I think this is an important point. The idea is to have the work completed by June. The council, some of the stuff may have budget implications. We don't know. We haven't even got into the work of it. Some of it might have budget implications. The mayor and the council start doing their budget stuff in August. We will have a new commission. We'll have new commission members potentially in July as well, so it seems that it would make sense to try and get this work done before we have people and maybe have to do a reset. The other thing I think is really important is that if the work that we come up with affects the CPP, we really want to try and get those changes done so there's sufficient time to communicate to neighborhood organizations. Here's what the CPP looks like now, and they're not scrambling like they were for the last time with only a month to do that work. And instead, we give them sufficient time. And so that's another reason why trying to get the work done in June is there. So that's just sort of big picture. All right, Jeff?
Well, first I want to just say thank you for doing that draft, and I appreciate the work that you put into it. And it's always easier to react to a draft, so
that's the idea.
That too have to be the one trying to develop it. I just had a couple of questions. One is on the direction. I know the copy that I picked up when I ran over to the Ways and Means budget on my after work. So reciting the actual council direction, it seems like we're missing just that little part about including the Neighborhood Investment Fund and the Community Innovation Fund in that actual direction, so I would prefer that we quote the actual language. Now, maybe the copy that David gave us is different than the December 8th version, because I know these are in process and done on the fly.
So can you tell which paragraph are you looking at?
It's the italicized reciting of the direction.
So that's what I thought was the latest and greatest. And if it's not...
And that's how it was December 8th, but I think the December 16th version had another clause inserted.
Great. The intent was to directly quote it. Yep. All right. Good catch. Thanks.
I had put out that suggestion, and whether you think it's appropriate to put in here, I think a comprehensive assessment of the resources by neighborhood, by whether it's DFD or CPED or NCR, should be done as part of this equity research. I don't know that that's in our domain to do, but I think that should be footnoted, or at least this group should say, yes, we should try and have some entity in the city assess, what are the foundation, what are the CPED investments, what are the capital program investments, because to me it's a totality of what's going into a neighborhood.
Do you think that's something that we could bake into the work plan?
I'd be happy to.
It seems like a level of detail that
incorporated.
Okay, so Robert, how do people feel about that? Just trying that information, I think, is going to be informing and necessary. I don't know who actually would end up doing that. Do you want to speak to that, David?
Just a little bit. I think it'll come in different pieces. One is, I think, when we go out and engage neighborhoods, that could be a question that we could ask them, so we know what resources that they're pulling in already. No better than to ask the users. And the second thing is I think what you're going to see coming out of the city council for a directive on this is also going to take care of the city side about what resources are available currently and direction that we're going with that. So I think we're just going to come into that, so including that in here. I'm not really sure how it falls into here, but I think we can get it from a couple different places.
Okay, so what I would recommend is if that could be noted in our notes for this meeting to bake into the work plan, rather than putting in the plan for a plan.
Yeah, I just want to make sure I'm understanding what you're looking for, which is...
I emailed it to
Yeah, I remember seeing, was that what you essentially went that earlier, right? But I still had some questions about that, which was...
it's tough to keep up with that.
Well, I wasn't sure if you're talking about sort of resources that the neighborhood organizations are getting from different resources, which might include different city grants, including NRP and foundation money, or where you're talking about larger investments in the neighborhood in terms of development.
I was thinking neighborhood organizations the way I read it, but what are you thinking?
I think it could be, capital investments don't necessarily go to the neighborhood organization, but they affect the amount, for example, on the neighborhood investment fund, investment in the park, investment in different elements. So,
I guess I want to step back from this because I'm still struggling with what's an equity issue. All right.
Yes.
And the more you complicate this thing, the worse the problem becomes of defining exactly what that equity issue is. And part of my attitude about the plan for a plan has to do with, well, all we're doing is putting off getting an answer to that simple question. And I don't know that we own answering that simple question. I think the city council does, as far as I'm concerned. And I think that's the first thing we can tell them, and I think we ought to tell them now, right? And I want them to, and I've asked this question every time we've had city council people being willing to come to the NCEC at this point, and I don't think anybody stepped forward and said, well, this is exactly what we had in mind. Even if I challenged them to say, is this an equity issue, right, kind of thing, which I did last time, about, well, if some got 53% and spent 80%, what is it really an equity issue here?
Melvin?
That was actually what I was going to say too. I'm struggling conceptually with what the council has put before us. And, it seems like from Hodges' answer at the last meeting, they have no idea what they enacted. They have absolutely no idea. They didn't know the amount of resources that they were capturing from neighborhoods. They didn't know where that money would be allocated to and how. And if you ask me, we did all this work on allocation for the CPP, right? And if you ask me, that was about equity. How do you balance what we have versus what neighborhoods need? Now, that work was done previously with NRP. How do we balance what neighborhoods need with allocations versus, what their needs are? And when they recapture those funds and they say reallocate those, and they make up this idea that there's an equity issue, and then they expect us to disseminate what that equity issue is, that's wrong. This came from them. It was their idea. They proposed the idea there was an equity issue, and I think that they have to respond to that. And let me tell you, I was shocked that Hodges had no idea, and she said herself, we put our heads together, me, the mayor, and another councilor, we put our heads together and we came up with this suggestion, which was not true. It was a staff person from the mayor's office who did that. But that being said, they should be able to explain to us in a way that we can explain to communities why we'd even be considering reallocating recaptured funds and what that equity issue is. So I think we have to take a step back.
I have one counter proposal, and that is that as part of our work plan, we're willing to go out and ask neighborhoods, right, if they feel, as a result of the council action, right, that there is an equity issue, and if so, what is it? And collect that information, right, and use that potentially for decision making or for analysis that makes sense.
That is Pandora's box.
Amy, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I wonder what
Amy,
one of them.
what Ed just said is what I think City Council wants us to do. Is they don't know how to fix it, and they want us to go out and ask neighborhoods, is there an equity issue? What do you see as equity issues, if there are any, and how would you like us to fix it? And then we can bring that information back and make a recommendation from it. That's what I was anticipating this plan for a current.
I wouldn't say that we're going to ask it directly that way.
Right.
We would engage neighborhoods about council action related to NRP funds. How did people feel about it? And deal with it.
Hey, let me give you a concrete example.
Yes, I do know the answer, and I'm willing to stand there and listen.
But with LCC, for example, the organization I manage, we're looking at $900,000 being recaptured, right? That was, and it's housing money. So by statute, that money is to be spent on housing. So the council doesn't even know if they can take that money out of statute, number one, right? So if you came to LCC and you said, what are the equity issues? We'd say, hey, because of our size, because of an allocation formula that was applied uniformly across neighborhoods in years past, you take our $900,000 and you're creating an equity issue in this neighborhood based on our planning of how to spend that. Now, is that helpful to the council when they've decided to take our money? I don't know. And again, what you have is a level of mistrust from the community because we were asked questions before about this equity with framework for the future. And they'll say, well, we told you before, you didn't listen to us. And that's why I'm saying that, like, this puts us in a really horrible position of representing a bad idea that we don't understand fully and bringing it to the community to get an answer that we've already heard. I really think this has to go back to council first.
Joe?
I want to add something that Commissioner Hines communicated because he's ill today. He indicated that he's not comfortable going out and being an advocate for the council's plan, which he thinks is a poor policy choice.
Yeah.
And I am comfortable going out and I don't want to use the word advocating, but engaging with the neighborhood organizations in the community. But I personally feel that the council members should be part of it, and I know that some other commissioners have a difference of a view on that. So I'm not sure if we get down to the detail, if we have to say that council members should be or should not be. And then the second point is, I think the NCEC, while I believe it's obliged to undertake this work and to fulfill the charge of the council and mayor, I think that we need to say that we don't necessarily agree with this policy choice and that we weren't involved in making it, just for our own credibility. And it's not being disloyal, it's not trying to be in your face, it's just saying we were not consulted on this, it happened.
David?
I just have a couple things, and I think what Jeff said and Melanie said are great. The role of the commission, I think that the council is looking for is to, what do we do from here forward, which is what you're saying. I think it's perfectly, I think it's a good idea to position it as we don't own this decision. We are working to do what we can with it. The council, from the conversations that I've had with them, don't expect NCEC to pretend to own this decision or to represent that they were part of it. And have actually said that they would go, a number of them have said that they would play a role in helping to own this, basically, for lack of a better way, when we go out to different neighborhoods and looking for us to say where that engagement would be. We've talked before. I mean, clearly, it's an important and strategic decision of where you use council or employ council members to be part of that process. But also, at what point are they not part of that process? So to maintain that integrity piece, have those candid conversations, but also place the ownership of the policy decision on those who made it. And I think there's a willingness to do that, and they're looking for us to define what that role will be.
So I want to, some of what we just talked about, I could see envisioned, captured in that work plan. The thoughtful, how we thoughtfully include council, recognizing they own the decision to do what they did, and we have been given a directive to do what is in that, what I call the equity directive. John?
Yeah, I think we really have an obligation to go out, and of course I agree with the sentiment that we're not acting as advocates for the decision. They made the decision to consult them, much land, much less us. And I don't particularly care to be part of the ownership of that particular thought, but they've asked a legitimate question, I think, which is to go out and ask questions, to engage the communities. And I think this has to take place on two different levels. We've talked about whether there are any council members along with this or not. But if we go out only with council members, we're going to get a set of answers that is going to be a little bit different than if we go out by ourselves. And I think council members have an obligation to go out, but I think they need to be able to plan that themselves and go out and have listening sessions, and some of them have been doing that, and get their take that way. But for us, I think to get something that is not going to be colored by having a council member or two sitting next to you, I mean, let's face it, you know, if it comes to an NCEC commissioner or a council member, who's going to get the attention in a meeting? It's going to be the council member because they've got power. But if they send us out and ask us to ask questions, I think that's a legitimate thing. And I think we need to do it, and we need to be able to come back with information. And they can go out themselves and be lightning rods, you know, for the particular kind of answers that they're going to get to the same questions we're going to ask, and we're going to get a different take.
All right, Crystal and Bill.
So going back to Ed's comment, how can we get the answer to what the council, along with Melanie saying how, well, she was right, they didn't know the impact of the decision that they made. How can we get that question answered to what the council sees as mitigating issues, such as, even if they were just writing such as after, but I mean, I don't care how they communicate it to us, but that was asked directly to Council Member Hodges. Melanie has brought it up in the past. I think it's a legitimate question. If we're being directed to do anything, I think we should know what it is, what they're saying. We could be on different pages.
Well, I think we can go out and, you know, we can anticipate that, you know, we're going to get a pile of invective. But that's a given. That's fine. It's expected. It's the stuff other than the invective that I want to hear. And that's going to be the part that's going to be useful, I think, for us and something that we can give the council. So we'll go out and we'll listen to some invective and some other stuff, and that's the other stuff I want to hear.
So, you know, I think, Bill, do you have I'm sorry, there's something I just wanted to add on the The thing that I think I'm hearing, and I think it, maybe Melanie has a different take on this, but I think what I'm hearing is that we want to make clear that we did not cause the funds, guarantee funds, to be frozen or taken. That's not what we're there to do. At the same time, though, I would pose to the group that if you say to the council, you define equity, we just gave up. It's a bad problem, and we were given it. We didn't create the problem. But if we we have an opportunity here to maybe shape it in a way that is best for neighborhood organizations. And if we just say to the council, you defined equity for us, I quite frankly am a little concerned about that from the neighborhood organization perspective. I would like us as a body to have the ability to talk to neighborhood organizations and come back with some specificity and say, this is what we think. And they can rebuff that, great. But we've done our work and we've worked to influence the outcome in the best way possible for neighborhood organizations. Melanie?
Here's why I disagree with that. Because I'm saying this equity issue is made up, right? This is a made up concept that floats along with their need to not fund anything from TIF funds and then recapture NRP funds. And then they said, because there's an equity issue here, right? It's just made up, and I'm not going to be part of, creating a rationale for what they did. And I'm thinking structurally, and actually I've come to agree with everybody at this table, yeah, we do have to go out and talk about it in the community, not sell it, but talk about it. I'm thinking about if I went out to a community meeting and I said, because people have a low level of understanding about policies and funding, right, when it comes to the city and NRP. So number one, we'd have to say to them, the council passed an action in December that does the following, right? And what it does is recapture funding that's been allocated to neighborhoods. It recaptured this funding so that it could what? And one of those things that we'd have to say is so that it could equalize or however deal with this equity issue that again is made up. And somebody made it up, it wasn't us. I'm not going to be the one to figure out what it is since we didn't make it up. That is clearly council responsibility. Tell us what that equity issue is. Now, my expectation is that neighborhoods will argue that and they will say, that's not an equity issue. But they have to have something to respond to. But I don't think that comes from the NCEC. I think that comes from the council.
We'll capture that
I
as we go.
have a question about that. I kind of think I thought the equity issue was about taking different quantities of money or percentages of money away from different neighborhoods. Like that's inequitable in the way that they take different percentages of money away. That's what I perceive.
That the TIF would?
That they removed different percentages of energy money away from different neighborhoods. And that was not equal in the way that the money away.
It's not that they didn't remove different percents, it's that they wanted to do it at 50%.
Yes.
But there were neighborhoods that had already spent, contracted more than 50%.
To use your example, Longfellow lost $900,000.
Well,
Corcoran lost $0.
right.
So
there's
there's
an
the
equity
equity issue.
Right, and if they didn't take the money, we would have that. That's what I'm saying is that's not.
Yeah,
Yeah, they caused
right.
it.
I think they're willing to own that they caused the equity issue.
But I think that they have to be the ones to lay it out clearly. I mean, I'm very confused still.
Can I got to say if I can say just a couple comments, and I got to go. I unfortunately have a 7 o'clock commitment I got to go to. So I'm interested to see how this conversation goes. So, two things. One is, I think your point's great, and I think part of our plan is defining what the role of the council is over this next year and what the role of the NCEC is, or will be. The council, I don't think it's our job to justify the action. To Matt's point, this is the situation that we're in. It's our job to make this as best as we can for the neighborhoods that we're working with and that we're serving. So that's our job. And however we define that and however we move forward, I would rather own that as this group and our department than not. The council, as far as justifying it and to basically selling that politically to neighborhoods, that's their role. And I think what I'm hearing from the council members is they know that and they're looking for us to say, when we're going engaging people, how do we balance that? How does the council go out and own that without hijacking an engagement process that we're using to address the other part about what's the best thing to do from here forward? So
Let me add something to this though that puts it into a bigger context. Is that I was looking back to 2007, the framework for the future documents moving forward, right? And people were saying to me all the time, this is just a council strategy to rob us of our NRP funds. It's going to get worse, okay? Now, if I look at my documents from 2007 to now, it happened. It actually happened. But what really happened was that policies kept being created and created and created and not lived up to. Okay? Like the principles of engagement, the framework for the future in general, the commitment when the Brookfield development was paid off for 100% funding to neighborhoods. These policies or these obligations have changed and changed and changed at the whim of the city council, right? So it's gotten to the point now that they mean nothing, right? And so there's a part of what we're going to do today. You know, maybe we have to accept this council action that happened in December, but there's a part of what I believe the commission needs to say is, at some point, when you obligate yourself to these funds and funding communities, and we're doing work based on that commitment of funding, we have to have some level of assurance that you're going to stick to it, okay? Because the same thing has already happened with the CPP funds. That's already changed. That we do not have the same commitment we had a year ago.
Bill, you know, Bill has been waiting, so I wanted to actually.
Actually, this is a subtle point. Dictionary.com defines pan as to criticize, so I think when you did that originally, I think you actually subliminally told it.
Get off that internet.
So anyway, I agree wholeheartedly, and with what Melanie was saying, and my concern about this is I don't see an end game. When we did the CPP, the end game was we had a fairly substantial amount of money, $3.5 million. And you know something, we could have decided that one of the threshold items was how many bowling balls you have in the neighborhood. I wouldn't have agreed with that, but that was something we decided. For here, we're literally talking about, what, a couple $100,000, $300,000? To try and figure out these equity issues for a $900,000 Longfellow to a zero for Carson. And I don't see the end game, because isn't it a benefit right now for those neighborhoods that actually are just now getting into phase 2, that they actually have some money coming into NRP that they were counting on, and even though it's 50%, it's some as opposed to nothing. Everybody that's over 50%, we just threw out the lifeboat and said, here's your CPP fund. I don't see how we ever come up, I mean, I think we can have a ton of these meetings. Quite frankly, I don't see an end game. I don't see a final decision for what is an equity, because it's all over the board.
Isn't it the 13.3 million that's captured, sorry to butt in, but isn't that what this spreadsheet that was handed out that shows the captured phase 2 money, isn't that what we're talking about? That we will be responsible for making recommendations on how that money gets programmed to the neighborhood?
That is the end game.
That is
So it's really the 13 point.
Is it?
Yeah.
Because I took that as that we were at
Unless some of that
50%. They've already
goes to
decided
tax
that.
relief.
I've heard conversations where they said we're going to use it for property tax relief. I asked the council.
I think it's very clear that that money is to be used to fund the department and the new program or programs.
Today it is, Matt.
Well,
For 2012 and 2013.
for 2012 and 2013, I'm sorry, yes.
So that amounts to $11 million. But they got more money.
Ish.
Right. Yeah.
And my understanding was that we didn't have to come, an end game product wouldn't necessarily be like a formula like the CPP was, but just recommendations about how to address equity issues that neighborhoods express to us through our outreach process.
John, and then,
Really, I think the purpose of this, for us, at least as I view it, is the act of engagement itself. And to going out, and there is a real problem, and what we've been tasked to do is actually get information. And whether we decide to come up with some, and I don't think we're going there, some formula to address it, I think what we're going to end up with is some generalizations that come back, and then we're going to dump it back on them, and they can sort it out. There's no point in doing anything too finite, because they're going to do what they're going to do.
Which could possibly be saying,
So-
that's not the issue we were
But the
speaking.
deal for me is, this is an opportunity for us to go out and do what we're supposed to do, which is engage the community, and this happens to be on something that's particularly sticky and messy and ugly. And if nothing else, I think it's going to be one hell of a learning experience.
I sense a fair amount of anger.
No, frustration. Don't
Okay.
make me out to be angry.
All right, I understand that. All right. I guess take this even wider, because after 2007, we had a state government that, you know, basically slashed support for the Minneapolis city government that, you know, in steps has created for a city that needs to have a balanced budget on an annual basis, problems that they just couldn't surmount. You know, so I'm not happy we're here, but we are here, and we do need to help work through this issue, as Commissioner Parrish said. And I'm personally more than willing to spend time talking to neighborhoods and trying to understand how, given the numbers that we're playing, not that we're playing with, but that we're aware of, right, how we can best, right, report back to the city on a process that could handle some of what I'll call the major issues that we see that are out there, where organizations who, because of high needs, because of where they are and the kinds of populations that they're working with and the programs they have in place, need to go past that 50% cap and figure out how many organizations are out there who are in that, because Kenwood doesn't need more money, right? And what to do about it.
It may very well be. So I think the thing here is the level of detail and the types of things we ask, and when we're out with neighborhood organizations, that's something that we can talk about at length. We can put into a work plan and figure out those details. I mean, this plan doesn't. It is purposely at a level that allows us to, as a group, later go back, so make our March 10th delivery, and then, you know, at the next COW meeting, talk about this level of detail. What do we want to ask? How do we want to ask it? I happen to be one of those people who are not terribly excited about having council members at these meetings a lot of times. I want to be thinking about how to do that, because as much as I don't want to own the decision that they made to freeze and take those phase 2 funds, I also don't want them causing a huge distraction and not allowing us to hear from neighborhood organizations about the things we want to hear about. And I tell you, I really, the more specificity, this is, you know, maybe the discussion for the work plan, but the more specificity that we give, I think the harder it is for the council.